my partner in crime now, Mr. Mike MacDonald. Mike MacDonald, everyone in the King Asilas kingdom is now going to see your face and get find out a little bit about you. But
Are you sure you want to do that? I mean, that doesn't sound very safe.
I know, but this is why I need to get I need one question out of the way first.
Okay.
Before we can start with anything else, all right?
There, now it's safe.
Mike MacDonald, everybody. Do you have a brother named Ronald?
He did, but I killed him. He's buried in the backyard. Yes.
You think for one moment that your parents, have you ever had that conversation with your parents? Hey, were you ever tempted to either name me or Spence Ronald?
You know, I never asked my parents that, because if the answer would have become yes, that would have been grounds for possibly death. We're 20 seconds into this interview, and I've already mentioned up killing people twice. I'm a little stressed, man.
I figured, hey, you've been asked this question before. You're probably used to it, right?
Yeah, for the most part.
I'm sure you got messed with. Well, you were homeschooled, so I can't even say you got messed with.
No, because when I was in elementary school and middle school, I went to a regular school. It was towards the end of middle school where my mom decided to pull me out and do the homeschooling thing. This was all, early 90s, 91, 92, 93, right around that area.
Right around hurricane time.
Yeah, in fact, let's see. Hurricane was 92, and I was 15 at the time. I was turning 16 that year. And wow, that's a long time ago.
I didn't mean to make you feel old, Mike. That wasn't my intention.
It's something very different, because I mean, I'm coming over from still photography, and going into video elements is, learning that whole environment and doing, timelines and screen, kind of like screen stuff, and editing and merging stuff together. Learning that it's exciting, because I can really tinker with it and I can fiddle with it, but then doing it on a budget that doesn't really exist is probably the most interesting part.
I've had a couple of companies in my life, right? I've failed at a few enterprises in my day.
What? You didn't get it right the first time out?
You get it right the first 3, 4, 5, or 6 times. But anyway, so here I am in this really creative venture. There's a high expectation on a personal level. You know what I mean? I think that for me, all the time that I invest in this project is it's really more about telling a story. I know that sounds really, it probably doesn't even sound right, but that's what it is. I'm a storyteller. I've always been that. You've known me as a writer. That's how we. Yeah. Well, we can actually. I met you. I gotta tell a story about you, Mike.
God, here we go.
So I met you because you answered an ad as a guitar player. I was looking for a guitar player in this band.
Bassist.
Oh, bass player. Excuse me. I was looking for a bass player. Shit, I gotta really get. Now, my deepest, sincerest apologies to all the guitar players out there. I was looking for a bass player.
Hey, don't let Davey 504 hear that, because he's going to beat you with the bass.
Mike, one of my favorite stories to tell about you is the time you got kicked out of the Stephen Talk House in Miami Beach for trying to finagle out of paying $2 for a pool game or something like that.
It was $1.50. It was $1.50. Hey, that was a lot of money in '95, bro.
So, Mike, what were you, 16 years old at the time?
In '95, I would have been 18.
You were not 21, so you
Correct.
In that bar.
Correct.
So I snuck you into that bar, and then you do the unthinkable and try to steal a pool game, and got kicked out.
Now, hang on. I did pay for the first one.
Well, sure. That's how you got the first set of balls. First set of balls.
Well, and because that takes balls.
You're trying to steal somebody else's balls is what you were trying to do.
Yeah, but the table didn't care one way or the other.
I don't know. We were just going to kind of go flipping around, because I did that with Michael in the first interview. I think you liked that video. You watched that video with Michael?
I did. It was really, really well done. The guy reminds me of Ronald Jenkins, not because it's just like his expression, because the guy's blind and just he still like squeezes his eyes shut, which is really interesting when he's talking, which tells me that there's a lot going on in that mind. You know, when he kind of the imagery that he must be seeing in his own mind is fascinating. You know? Sure.
And you know, I kind of want to see what's in your mind right now, Mike. So I'm gonna throw an offbeat question to you to get this thing rolling some more. So you hear, over the last few years, you've heard a lot about this idea that people colonizing the planet Mars.
Right.
So I wanted to ask you, and you don't have to answer. You know, you don't have to answer your true feelings, but you just kind of just wing it. But would you go to Mars?
Would I go?
Go to Mars knowing you would never come back. Now that you've had a couple of weeks in quarantine and you know what it's like to not go outside.
I think that would really depend on what the living situation would be on the colony. So like if there was, okay, you know, you're going to be among the first away team to be on there and you're going to build everything and you have a 98% chance of like, you know, something going catastrophically wrong, probably not. If that was like in the second phase or third phase where things were like the foundational stuff was done and then to finish everything off, I'd consider it.
So basically you wouldn't want to go there and just start fresh. You want to make sure when you get there, you would have Grubhub and you would have access
No, just to have something in case something were to go catastrophically wrong, at least have a place to like evacuate to. So that would have to be in the second phase of the construction of, you know, any type of colony there.
Second phase. So you're a part of phase 2, Mike. You came on board into this project. What made you decide to come into the King Asilas world? I mean, you could have done anything else, you know, like watch Netflix. I could think of a dozen other things right off the top of my head that you could have done. Why did you decide to join this team?
I wanted to get involved in a project that I firmly believed was going to be something that would get much larger than what it is now. You know, you always hear about, oh, I should have jumped on that then. You know, the guys, oh, I should have bought Apple stock when it was like, you know, $1.50 back in like the 80s, and never did. And, you know, now they're like, oh, crap, now it's like $200 a share, and I'm stupid at, you know.
Well, no,
I want to get in.
I was one of those guys with Bitcoin. I wrote an article about Bitcoin in a blog years ago before it hit the ceiling. And I was like kicking myself afterward. I'm like, should have listened to my own self. You know? So
yeah,
they're trying to convince everyone else to do it. I was the main one not doing it.
Yeah, there's stories of people that have kind of just, you know, bought into it thinking, what's a few $100? And then they forgot about it. Mm-hmm. And then it was like, oh, I now have lots of money now. Yeah, that happened. See, like my first instinct is to respond. Well, my first instinct is to respond this way. And then my other one's like, well, what about this option, right? So I'll split the baby.
Okay.
Okay. If I were to choose option A, I'd be like, okay, what are the world's mysteries? How to effectively communicate with women, or time travel?
Now, would you time travel forward or back?
Forward or back?
Yeah. Would you go ahead like 100 years, or would you go back 1,000 years? What would you do?
It'd be a personal thing for me. I would travel back to undo some mistakes that I've made that I've regretted.
Then you would upset the timeline. The time paradox would be destroyed.
Not necessarily.
Basically,
Not necessarily. No? And the reason why I think that is that on each of our, now mind you, I've watched Back to the Future 1,000,000 times. Okay?
I bet you have.
The influences that we have in our own timelines, overall time is going to do what it's going to do, right? But your own personal timeline is relatively unique to you and your circle of influence.
But what do you like? Have you ever seen that movie Butterfly Effect with Ashton Kutcher?
Of course, absolutely. But I wouldn't like.
Every time he went back, it got worse.
Right, but see, here's the funny thing. I wouldn't go back and change a national event. In other words, well, what if he went out and killed Hitler?
Yeah, everybody says that.
Yeah, everybody says that, right? Well, then you completely undo, like you were saying, butterfly effect. Things could get worse, right? So I would influence my own environment.
Do you believe in Bigfoot?
No.
You live out in Utah. You live in the mountains. You don't
No.
believe in Bigfoot. So you laugh at anybody who does? Because there are people that are serious Bigfoot believers.
Sure. And would I laugh? No. Because I've always thought people should be allowed to believe what they're going to believe, even if it's wrong.
Even if it's wrong.
Mm-hmm.
So, you say that believing in Bigfoot is wrong?
No, I'm saying that if they believe it, that's good for them. I think it's wrong. They don't. I'm okay with that.
Oh, I see.
I don't have to agree with someone to how do I put that? I don't have to agree with somebody to respect them. I can disagree with somebody and still respect their point of view, their thought processes, and their opinions. I can say, I think your opinion is a little bit off, and here's why. But I can have a conversation with that person and be like, okay, this is why I think it's wrong. And then if they tell me, well, you're wrong, I say, oh, okay, great. I'm okay.
It'll eventually go there.
Of course it will.
Interesting. I'm glad we're talking about this particular thing and the way you brought it up. And it's something that I seldom talk about openly when it comes to, I'm gonna incorporate aspects of the show into this interview.
Sure. Mm-hmm.
So in Asilas' circle, he has his two houses, right? He has the house of Morale, he has the house of Terra. So he has these lords, right? Like Capone and Shelley. And on one side, they're all believers in God, right? The House of Morale, all the lords in the House of Morale are believers in God. And all the lords on the House of Terra are not. They're either agnostic or they're atheist or whatever. And the reason why he set up his circle that way is so that he would have both sides of the argument. I think you were kind of alluding to that. I'm not sure. Were you alluding to something like that? Maybe I missed that.
No, you didn't miss it. And I think that's where as a society, where I think the King Asilas story, as it's progressing, I think that's kind of an underlying, it might even be an unintended side effect of the story, is that, I think we can exist while having different views, right? And not being, well, you're the stupidest idiot on the planet because you believe X, Y, and Z. And then it just goes fighting, clashing back and forth, right? And so as I go through each episode, I see that kind of that conflict as an underlying nature. That's how I'm reading into it now. And of course, I'm only 10 episodes in because I'm listening to each episode as I'm creating it, because I don't want this. I don't want to influence what I'm making. No, hang on. I don't want to influence what I'm making with. I already know what's going to happen in the story, because I'm making the imagery as I'm listening to the story.
Yeah, I got you. I understand. Yeah, I think for me, as the creator of this character, Asilas, which is a very complex character, and I think he's very there's a very contradictory character. Like there's things he does on a consistent basis where he contradicts himself. He walks completely two different paths. He's a I don't know if he's bipolar or psychotic, or he's a psychopath, or he's
no. I think he's got internal conflict. You know what I mean? I think there's internal conflict with what he wants to accomplish something, right? He wants people to, at least from what I've gathered, he wants there to be a kind of a unified society, right? But then he has to try to merge everything, but also he has this authoritarian streak to where these things are going to happen because they're, in his mind, they're critical for the success of his ideology.
Gotcha.
And so that conflict is like how that beats with each other. I think that's where his internal conflict is really emanating from.
It's really interesting that you bring that up, and I think that I'm able to bring this story, if you will, come and bring it along, and in such a way that I think sometimes I go a little too far in terms of pushing this psychology, if you will, because I've gotten messages from people, and I've talked to people who are listening to the show, and I've asked them, just point blank, so like, well, what is it that you feel, whatnot, what is it that gets your juices flowing with it, and I've been hearing more and more that some people get really scared. The idea of what's happening in the show is, I guess, because of all the stuff that is happening currently and has been for quite some time.
Oh yeah,
I think it terrifies some people, and I've had people say it's kind of like horror. But it's just not. I mean, I get it. Okay, there are some pretty horrific scenes. I get it, but
sure.
I really tried my best to make this a dark satire, and I don't think it's selling that way. I think it's either you catch the tongue-in-cheek humor that I put in, or you don't. If you don't, it probably terrifies you at some point.
Well, and to be honest, that's one reason why, like, if you saw in episode 10, when I was compiling episode 10, I threw in like two deliberately, like, there's a term for it, what's called pattern interrupt. Okay, and one is a little bit of an Easter egg to find, which I'm hoping you saw. And then the other one is this, like, it goes serious, and all of a sudden there's this sudden, like, comedic aspect that's just like, just to kind of throw you off, but also to realize to not take this as serious as the overall tone is coming, because it's not intended to be, it's not supposed to be a 1984, but in all reality, I think King Asilas' storyline may end up being a 21st century iteration, or, like, in other words, the 21st century's 1984.
I got you. I understand what you were saying. I hope that when we reach the finality of this series, which we're halfway in now, because I slated it for 6 seasons. I don't think I'll go beyond that, but you never know.
You see where the story goes.
See where it goes. But I definitely, for sure, at the very least, the demise of this king has to happen at some point.
Oh yeah, of course.
So.
Well, and I think there's some clues that have kind of shown themselves in a very small way in episode 10, where you have the 2 sons, you have Isaac and Jacob, right?
Yeah. And
there's and that right there, I think is kind of like a foreboding.
Well, Mike, a lot of people I have a lot of followers that are Christian, and so when they get to the story about Isaac and Jacob, they immediately connect it to the biblical Isaac and Jacob, which is
right.
They're right on cue with that, and
right.
If you haven't heard beyond that, so you only got this as far as episode 10 at this point. So I'm not going to tell you where it goes from here, but it continues. All you got to do is read the story of Isaac and Jacob in the Bible, and then you'll understand why they're there and why why it happens the way it does. Mm-hmm. I keep going back to some of the biblical aspects of the story, because I think underneath everything, that is the greatest story to me that has ever been told. You believe it or you don't believe it, that's up to you. But for me, like, the book of Revelations is the most terrifying thing that has ever been written.
Yeah. Well, and there's something, I wish I could articulate it the way it was, I heard it the other day. And it was something to the effect of people's fear can fuel what actually happens out of that fear, if that makes any sense. In other words, I'm afraid the world's going to come to an end. Well, okay, how? Well, I'm afraid we're going to all get this crazy virus and we're all going to get sick.
You mean like self-fulfilling prophecies?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. There was a way it was articulated earlier on, and I heard it the other day, and I was like, oh, I like how that was structured.
It's funny, when the week that we put out, I forget what episode it was the week, that episode that Shelley and the American Army was they were releasing, like, poisons in the Wuhan region of China. And that was the same week that the coronavirus started hitting the newsreels. And it was really odd, because I remember mentioning it. I'm like, it's so funny. Like, if you listen to this episode we just put out, we talk about the Wuhan region in China and the poisons that are there, and then all of a sudden, boom, here we have coronavirus.
Yeah, and that was written 2 years ago.
It was written a while back. I mean, I know I went over that specific episode. I wrote it over the summer last year.
Mm-hmm.
There was no way I had any insight into it. It wasn't like, oh, there's Corona. Let me write the episode real quick. I wish I could write an episode that quick.
Yeah, and that's what makes this so unique, in that when you look at the placement of this coming out now, where we're expanding it to an audience that's for the most part at home, right? And then when you look at when this was written, when this was all put together, you're like, well, that's an interesting coincidence.
Yeah.
And so there's certain clues that I've kind of cued in on where I need to get involved in this.
I'm glad you're on board, Mike. I mean, you're making a lot of making a lot of this more adventurous for me personally. And plus, we worked together on Voodoo Highway back. And for those of you who have no idea what I just said, Mike and I worked on a magazine. Well, actually, Mike kind of created the imagery of a magazine, music rag in South Florida back in the 90s, right? It was mid-90s.
95, 96, 97.
It was called the Voodoo Highway. That was the first time I'd ever seen a Windows desktop. The first time I'd ever seen a publisher app.
Dude, I did that all with Photoshop 2.0.
2.0, yeah, imagine that.
Oh, that entire layout, dude. Like, I literally wanted Voodoo Highway when because you and I were doing a rehearsal one night. I was like, hey, wait a minute, I've got Photoshop. What if I just made a cover idea? So I went home that night. I jumped in my computer, Windows 3.1, and I opened up Photoshop, and about 2.5 minutes later, when it finally opened up, because that's how fast they were back then, I was able to I had this idea of this warped image on the top, kind of how it was all. I remember like it was yesterday. I was making the Voodoo Highway logo, and I had this prominent number 1. You remember that?
Yeah.
Prominent number 1 right in the center. And I printed it out, and I was so friggin' excited because this was back in like October, November of '95, and I just turned 18, and I went over to it and I showed you. I go, dude, look at this, and then you're like, the look on your face was like, holy shit, this could be real.
Yeah.
And then you took it, if I remember correctly, you took it over to Jay, and Jay was like, well, okay, how do you think you can raise the money? Do you think you can raise the money for this? And I'm like, yeah, let me make some phone calls. So that was when I started calling companies up that were already advertising in Rag and Jam.
Yeah.
Okay. And I said, hey, I'll do it for, what are you paying for a full page ad? Cool. I undercut them by like 25% or so, maybe even less. And I think I raised what, $3,000 or $4,000 like in a week?
Yeah. That was bad.
Yeah.
I mean, we're right about now.
Yeah. But dude, this is the funny thing. I mean, I literally took from something that wasn't even in existence.
Didn't even exist, right?
And I was able to raise the money to make it into something.
Yeah. So we're going back to that. I learned so much about ad sales during those times. And when I came to Baltimore, the first thing I did was I got hooked up with a magazine here, and I just went straight to the ad sales, and it just opened up all kinds of doors for me. But in the podcast world, though, Mike, it doesn't quite work that way.
I'm learning that.
Very, very different beast, and it's. I think a lot of times I'm scratching my head, going, okay, all right, I've owned companies before, I've done ad sales before, I've made a living on my own, with my own companies before. I mean, what the hell? But I guess when you have, the internet is both. It's a double-edged sword. It's both a great opportunity, and it's also you can drown in it, like literally. You can get lost in the vast sea of it. Like if you don't have a compass, if you don't have know their way around through the stars, if you can't read the map in the sky, you're gonna get lost.
Oh, yeah. Well, and part of how my brain works is that and this sounds a little trite, but the longest journey begins with the first step. Right. Well, how do I do this? Well, go do it.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So I'll go out there and do it. Okay. I didn't know a whole lot about editing videos or putting stuff together until I was like, here, let's try it. So I tried it a little bit. Okay. I can kind of figure stuff out. Okay. And then the other kind of little mantra that I live off of is I don't remember the exact Gaelic phrase, but it translates into English as "wherever I'm thrown, I land on my feet." Yeah.
Well, the second book is all centered around Abigail.
Ah, okay.
Because
So Abigail's
Abigail
going to be your spinoff.
is she dies. I'm sorry to break. Spoiler alert. She's only in season 1. She doesn't come back. She's gone. So there's this other this mystery behind Abigail. It's like, I don't understand why she's dead. She was a popular character. Some people really liked her. Some people really didn't. And there was this obsession that the king had with Abigail. So why is she dead? Like, why is she gone? And so the book really gives you. It's told in the first person through her eyes. Okay, the story is told through her eyes, and it walks you through how she even met Asilas in the first place. How she realized she was on his radar, and why she later on learned why she was on his radar. And all the things that go through a young girl's mind play out in this story. And you get to see this other side of Lord Capone, how he is, because we talk about his drinking and his womanizing, but until you see it through Abigail's eyes, do you really grow a detestment for him? And I really wanted to fester that in this story, in the book with Abigail. It's like I wanted the reader to kind of really not like Lord Capone. Like, I really don't want you to like him. And so that's, I guess, as feminism as I'm going to get in my life.
There's definitely a duplicitous nature with Lord Capone. Where it's like he's serving his own self-interest, and he's trying to serve, King Asilas, but while still kind of getting his own jollies.
Oh, to me, he is the ultimate wingman,
Mm-hmm.
And he takes full advantage of it. I think that if in the real world I was King Asilas and you were my Lord Capone, you would probably do all the things that would get you in trouble, and you'd say, well, it's Joe, it's my buddy, he ain't gonna do nothing to me. And I probably wouldn't. And that's what happens with, he knows he can get away with it.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
So, all right, let's change gears here. What is the scariest thing you've ever experienced? Ex-marriages don't count. You can't include those in this question answer.
Okay, you'll like this. Scariest experience ever.
All right.
I've been over to the UK on 2 separate occasions in 2015 and 2019. On the 4th day, I believe, we were slated to get onto a ferry boat to go from Heysham over to Douglas, Isle of Man, to go see the TT races. So we were meeting up with 4 other motorcyclists, but the budget would only allow for us to be on 1 bike. So I had to sit on the back of his motorcycle while he rode, while we're all dressed up with our gear, leather, rucksacks, the whole 9 yards. And we had to ride on the motorway from Carlisle all the way to Heysham, which is about 100 miles, at 3:30 in the morning. Okay. Now, to get there on time, now these are all sport bike riders. We're doing about 100, 105 miles an hour at 3 o'clock in the morning. Now, the one thing about the motorways in the UK, they're surprisingly dark.
I would imagine you're out in the country.
And I mean, like, damn near pitch black. And it was an overcast night. It was about 44 degrees heading out there. And we're going easily 100, 105 plus. And I'm sitting on the back where my butt is literally this far from the end of the motorcycle. Okay.
Wow.
Now my buddy, he's about 6'2", 6'1". I'm 5'8" on a good day, and we're all geared up. Okay. And so I've got leathers, I've got my armored pants, armored jacket, armored boots, armored gloves, helmet, and a rucksack, and I've got to hang on to this dude doing 105 miles an hour. Okay. Now,
Wow.
this is a pretty powerful bike. Now, here's where it gets to the scary part. About a third, maybe let's say halfway there, we're going down this hill, and all of a sudden, I have this amazingly bad itch in the back of my like inside my helmet, where I've got to do something about it because the itch is driving me absolutely crazy. So I make the near fatal error of reaching back to scratch my head, and all of a sudden this happens.
Whoa.
And I almost fell off the bike at 100 miles an hour plus.
Whoa.
And because the wind, we were going into a headwind. So we're going into 100 miles an hour speed at probably a good 15 mile an hour headwind, possibly even a crosswind. And that action, because the jacket's kind of big, caught like a sail and twisted me around, and I'm hanging on to my buddy like this, and I about lost it. Now, this particular bike has the foot pegs, they're only about this long for the rear passenger. It's called a pillion seat, okay? And when you're wearing riding boots on a pillion seat, they don't stay on very well.
Yeah.
So your body is contorted, like, you know, your knees are practically up in your chest, and you're turtling like this. And remember, I've got a rucksack on that's supposedly aerodynamic, and had I had a regular backpack, I probably would have been ripped off the back of the bike, and I probably would have fallen off.
Whoa.
That was fucking scary.
Wow. I don't think I could top that. And here, I don't know if I could top that.
I think he's internally conflicted. He's decisively going through what he thinks is the right thing to do to accomplish the overall outcome he wants.
There was this Reddit thread a while back where the guy was saying that I forced people to like King Asilas because of the way the storyline goes. I'm not sure I agree with that. I argued with the guy just for a minute.
Right.
He also accused me of being a fascist sympathizer.
Everything I don't like is fascism.
He's a fascist. I'm like, dude, you're so dumb. You're like super dumb. But anyway.
Can you read me a bedtime story? Everyone I don't like is Hitler.
Wow. Hysterical. Isn't it stupid? Well, whatever. I'm not a fascist. It's like the opposite of a fascist. That's why I think the whole idea of the story is funny to me.
I think most Americans can't figure out what fascism really means.
I don't think they know what it means. You know,
right.
They hear it say and then they repeat it like a parrot. But,
exactly.
Yeah, no, I don't know. Do you think the country would or could become a monarchy? You're a political guy. We won't get into all the politics because it's not wise. But
yeah, do I think it could happen? I mean, in all reality, I think anything can actually happen, right? Mm-hmm. Do I think it's likely? No. And the reason being is that the micromanaging of people's actions, mm-hmm. that is already setting off a lot of people like, hey, wait a minute. I don't like this micromanagement stuff. And I don't know if you saw the little short videos that I sent you in the grocery store. Yeah. It's little things like that on their own, they're innocuous, right? They're annoying, they're inconvenient, right? But when you look at the bigger picture, people are like, hang on, this trajectory is not something I'm good with. Mm-hmm. And so if people kind of move into this monarchy type of ideology, you're going to have a faction and be like, well, sure, I don't know anything about it, but let's give it a shot. Yeah, right. That's very true. Now, there was a quote, I think it was Benjamin Franklin, I'm not sure who said it, so forgive me if I don't know, but I think it goes something like, for those who will give up liberty for the sake of security deserve neither. Correct. So, if you accept something like a king that will say, oh, we'll pay we'll give you a monthly stipend or a monthly pay. Universal basic income, whatever, blah, blah, blah. And well, yeah, sure, I don't have to work. I can just live off the government and whatever. Right. And then, they will believe anything.
and they don't have a say anymore because who the powers at be will decide who's gonna run the country.
Right.
And I think that happens throughout the world on a lot of ways. And it's a disaster.
Well, and that's where you have this kind of diametric opposition of some people believe that our rights and our privileges come from government, right? Yeah. They're granted to us by our government. When in reality, and this is kind of coming back to the framing of the Constitution, is that our rights are granted to us by our Creator, whoever that Creator is.
Inalienable rights. I don't think people understand what inalienable rights mean.
Right.
Inalienable means that the government didn't give it to me, so the government can't take it away.
Right.
I know it's so hard to resist going into the politics thing. It really is. But we've gone back and forth on the show a little bit more than I thought we would. But when you do that, you open yourself up to politics. It's just natural. People who listen to the show are always making comparisons to what happens on the show and what's happening in real life here in this country. Comparing President Trump to Asilas or vice versa and whatnot. I'm like, I don't think you can really put these two guys in the same boat. Although I think we're going to do this, and I was talking to somebody yesterday. Who was I talking to about this? We're going to do some episodes, right, where they're not going to be in the normal rotation. You can only listen to the episodes on Patreon. Right. And in one of the episodes, it's going to be a rather short episode. It's going to be Quentin Capone and Asilas getting drunk on their whiskey, right? So they're getting drunk and they start shooting off at the mouth. You get to hear Asilas curse, slurring and whatnot.
Shit.
And he's, the question's going to be posed about, what do you think about the former United States presidents? And then he starts going off on all of it. He goes off on Trump. He goes off on, Bush. He goes off on all of them. Nixon.
Which all of them are going to deserve that kind of scrutiny.
Well, when you're the king, you don't give a shit. Why would you care? You think Asilas really gives a crap what anybody thinks? He doesn't.
Right.
He doesn't. And there was another podcaster who said that in one of those reviews. He talked on and on and on about the show. It was like 20 minutes. It was great. And in the end, he was just like, he's like, you know what I like about King Asilas? I like that he doesn't take shit from it. He doesn't care what anyone thinks. He does whatever the hell he wants to do. He doesn't give a shit.
And that particular element of Asilas' personality is the link that a lot of people put between Asilas and Trump.
Yeah, I understand that. But, Asilas doesn't go around saying I'm the greatest thing that has ever happened.
I'm a very stable genius.
Right. Of course. No, I get that. But you got to remember, I think it's part of human nature to find similarities.
Sure.
Right? When you look at how human have survived, they survive by finding similarities. Okay, my friend ate this berry that looked like this and he died. I'm going to avoid that because it's similar. It's that survival aspect.
Okay, Mike.
Hardwired into us.
All right. You sold me. So maybe we should have a Q&A, another show down the road, and we'll try to actually draw comparisons between King Asilas and Donald Trump.
You can if you want.
You could do that, or maybe other leaders of the world.
It would be worth it just to see what direction it goes and to see what kind of feedback. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I would dare say that Asilas probably has more in common with Putin than he does. Putin and Xi Jinping. How do you say his name?
Xi Jinping. Xi Jinping.
Yeah. Right.
Xi Jinping. Right.
He has more in common with that guy and Putin than I think he does.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I don't know much about. Xi Jinping. His leadership style is not. His leadership style is not as out in the open as, say, Putin or Trump. But that's deliberate because of how the Chinese Communist government allows information to kind of come out.
Sure.
Right?
Which brings us to our sponsorship. If you'd like to sponsor this program, please contact Mike MacDonald. Mike, I don't have a brother named Ronald MacDonald.
Next time I see you, I'm going to kick you in the shins. I'm as violent as a marshmallow, and just you wait.
That's okay. I mess with MacDonald all the time with the same thing.
and I'm sure she's just as bothered by it.
She's just as angry with me about it too. She's like, "Will you just stop that already?" Well, I said, "I want to meet your brother named Ronald." And she's like, "Stop!" It's like, "Really?"
Yeah, and I'll bet you, Nick, one of these days, she's gonna TP your house. That's like my standard. That's like my standard threat. I know where you live. I'm gonna TP your house.
Are you threatening the king? That's actually, I could execute you for that.
No, but and I think if we get this marketed right and we get a few thousand YouTube subs and the word starts getting around, we can do these sorts of live streams where we're watching and we're interacting with our fans and Patreons and patrons and whatnot.
You said it too.
I sure did.
You just said it.
And I'll own that. But to get involved, and that was kind of what I was alluding to earlier, where I was talking about, later down the road, once we have an established kind of audience, picking a few of these people to kind of help mold the direction we're going to go into.
Yeah.
And I think that's what's going to be advantageous in this, where we're going to see audience participation to help move the story. And I wanted to even bring it even in further, where there's a possibility where we can audition patrons to do, to kind of like audition for voice roles.
Sure. Sure.
And get them involved, because I mean, dude, what dream of a fan of anything, right? Gosh, I wish I could be involved in that project somehow. Well, we've come up with a way to do that.
We do like a voice, but like
yeah,
the voice act.
Yeah. Yeah, just to do a guest spot, and obviously we pick somebody that would fit the role of a character, even if it's a short-lived character, and that could launch somebody else's career. You never know.
Yeah, those are always in supply. There's those short-lived characters.
Because we're always going to need entertainment.
Yeah, man, for sure. Anywho, all right, my brother. Is there any last words of wisdom you'd like to share before we sign off?
I think the best thing to do to make this project grow is literally tell your friends. It's in its infancy as far as the visuals and stuff, and this is going to be something to where there's not a lot of popular things out there that you could say, hey, I got involved before they were big, right? I was doing this before it was cool. And that's, I think, if the patrons that we have now, kind of get that word of mouth, hey, check this out. This is interesting. Listen to the content. You're stuck in the house all day, or whatever. You're working, you're driving along, you're listening to it on your podcast, Spotify, whatever. Give it a listen, share this out, and the story is extremely engaging. It's a fascinating storyline. And we would be massively grateful for you to do that. I'll leave you with kind of a funny story. I was at a local grocery store because part of what I do in a way to keep making money in this lovely economy we have right now is I do deliveries for I guess I can say the name Instacart. Okay, and I was walking up to a refrigerated case, and just for illustrative purposes, let's say this is the case right here. And there's a wall, and there's a fellow standing right here. I don't know if there we go. There's a fellow just standing just outside of the refrigerated case. Just notice that there's a dude standing there. And I start looking for this particular package of chicken, okay? And after about 4 or 5 seconds, the guy goes, hey! And I'm like, what? You're not socially distancing. And I go, oh, okay. He came up to me, right? And so I'm looking for my stuff, and about 5 seconds goes by, and he goes, hey, you need to social distance. And I'm like, that's nice. And I just keep going about my business, right? And another 5 seconds, he goes, I'm being serious. You need to do this. And I go, what are you going to do about it? And I didn't even look at him. I just kept going, looking for this particular package of chicken. And he goes, well, I'm going to beat your ass. I go, well, that kind of would defeat the purpose, wouldn't it? and he goes, yeah, I'll beat your fucking face in. I go, okay, that's nice. And completely said, whatever, right? And so he's like, you have to follow those rules. And I go, do you want me to call you an ambulance? And I just keep going about my business. I'm going to kick your ass. And I go, okay, you do that. You know?
God.
And then finally he gets so frustrated. He turns around and goes, who do I report? Someone not socially distancing. Who do I report that to?